Okay.
Welcome
Good
to
evening.
another lecture by CEMMIS, Zakia.
Yes, hello, welcome. And this is one of our episodes regarding Syria after the fall of Assad, its challenges and dynamics. Today we have with us Professor Zahid.
Professor Dyer is going to, the title of his lecture is Syria's Post-Assad Era, Challenges and Dynamics. A short bio for Professor Dyer. He's an academic and currently teaches at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland and at the University of Ghent in Belgium. He has been an affiliate professor at the European University Institute. He's an expert on political economy of the Middle East and has worked with various UN agencies, NGOs, and research centers in consulting and expert mandates to conduct programs, trainings, and research. He has written 3 books: Hezbollah, The Political Economy of Lebanon's Party of God; Syria After the Uprising, The Political Economy of State Resilience; and Palestine and Marxism. So, Professor Dar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you. So I hope not to be too long like this. We have a fruitful discussion, even though there's much to say. And definitely, I believe that the last week, the latest week in Syria has been, and very, say, very much of a catastrophe, and changed. It was a major, I would say, change. So while following the end of the Assad regime, which was a despotic regime for ruling over Syria for 54 years, since the time of his father, Hafez al-Assad, in 1970, continued with his son, Bashar al-Assad. There was a lot of hope for the Syrian population and its great majority for a bright future, but many challenges are present, and we knew this from the beginning, but the political and territorial fragmentation has only increased in the past few weeks. The lack of inclusivity, I will come back to this, the democratic inclusivity of the new ruling authorities have only in many ways deepened, and the security environment has not improved, quite on the opposite. And as I was mentioning before, the sectarian massacres that occurred on the coastal areas has presented, deep division within society, and also reflect the numerous problems, limitations, and challenges regarding the transitional phase. So I'll try to divide my presentation in 3 main parts. First of all, how does the transitional path on a democratic perspective is occurring since the fall of the Assad regime? Also, alongside this dynamic regarding what kind of transitional phase we're witnessing, the economic orientation of the new government, the structural economic challenges facing the new ruling authorities and Syria, and finally, what is needed basically to see an improvement in the situation, or my analysis, my critical analysis of what is needed to go forward. So coming back on the transitional phase, since day 1 following the fall of the Assad regime on the 8th of December, the new ruling authorities led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the newly nominated or self-nominated president Ahmed Shareh, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, has made everything in order to consolidate the power of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and its allies on the newly state institutions. This was reflected in the day following the Assad regime fall by the nomination of a new government that was basically a copy-paste from what we had in Idlib, where Hayat Tahrir al-Sham used to govern since 2017 in this area, meaning all person affiliated with HTS or close to it, only composed of Arab Sunni men, except for one woman, which, and I'm saying this obviously ironically, was in charge of women affairs with a very much conservative discourse. Also, the consolidation of power went through the establishment of a new army, a new Syrian army, in which, again, you have a complete homogeneity among its members, Arab Sunnis, and very much exclusive. A new establishment of a new security service administration, which is headed by the, if you want, the right hand of Ahmed al-Shara, a personality that has been accompanying Ahmed al-Shara or Julani since the beginning of the 2000s, and the time where Ahmed al-Shara or Julani was joined, if you want, the Islamic State in the 2000s in Iraq. At the same time, there's been nomination of new governors for various provinces, all affiliated or close allies of HTS. Similarly speaking, when it came to the designation of new leadership in professional association, trade unions, very often we've seen a continuation of previous policies of the Assad regime by the designation of leadership affiliated with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So there were protests within certain professional associations, such as the Law Professional Association, the Bar Association, asking for democratic elections within the professional association. This has unfortunately not been the case. Moreover, several initiatives led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham government, or so-called transitional government, because it was initially announced that a new government would be nominated on the 1st of March of this year. This has not been the case here. We're still expecting, maybe in the following weeks, a new transition government. We'll see its composition, its responsibilities, what will it be able to do. But also there have been various initiatives that have not shown or demonstrated any willingness of the current and new ruling authorities, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, to be more democratic and inclusive. First, we've seen the National Dialogue Conference that was organized in less than a week. Invitations were sent to people living outside the country a day before. So, and you have a lack of representation also of the northeastern areas, especially the Kurdish political parties, where the self-administration led or dominated by the PYD, which is the sister organization of the PKK, or even also the Kurdish National Council, which is closer to the Barzanist authorities in northern Iraq, that complain of the lack of inclusion and not their presence. Similarly, there was a lack of representative personalities of southern areas, whether Sueda or Daraa. Similarly, also coastal areas was less represented. And also the way the conference was organized. It was a day conference with only 3 hours sessions to speak of very important topics that would need days or weeks to be discussed, such as transitional justice, economy, civil society, etc. Following this national dialogue conference, which was criticized largely for its lack of, again, of seriousness and the way how it was taken into account by the new ruling authorities. And to be very clear, and I have friends that participated in this national dialogue conference. So it's not a criticism of the person that participated in it, but it's the lack of process before, during, and after the conference. The lack of attempts to really have an influence on the decision of the ruling authorities. Similarly, when we look at the new temporary constitution that was confirmed a few days ago by the Syrian presidency, Ahmed al-Shara, while it is quite a lot of articles are in constitution with the previous constitution, such as the name of the country is still the Syrian Arab Republic, which is discriminatory. Still, the Arab language is the only official language. or moreover, Islamic jurisprudence or Sharia became the main source of law or the principal source of law instead of a major source of law. So even more, giving more importance to Islamic Sharia. The president is still, or should still be a Muslim man. But moreover, one of the problematics, while the process to establish this new constitution was also problematic, not inclusive, not democratic, and the content, as I was saying. But moreover, the so-called theoretical separation of power between the Syrian presidency and the rest of powers, judicial or legislative, is officially enshrined, but in reality, it is not the case. The Syrian presidency has legislative powers, have check and balance to constitute an authoritarian power. So also here we see the lack of democratic inclusivity and the lack of, and the willingness by the new ruling authorities, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, to consolidate its power. So we have, first of all, a transitional phase that is very much concentrating on seeking its consolidation on state institutions. At the same time, the main objective also of these institutions is to gain legitimacy by regional and international actors. It was really, since the beginning, trying to seek this legitimacy rather than internal legitimacy among wider section of the population. This is why it made very much cordial comments towards Israel, saying it's not willing to challenge or to put in front Israel, just as when its first visit to Saudi Arabia, the new Syrian president, Ahmed al-Shara, guaranteed to Saudi Arabia saying, the revolution is finished, now we're in a construction or building a state. So it's to give guarantees to the regional state. And similarly to the European and US, it's trying to give guarantees. It's more difficult with the US that basically is with especially Trump presidency do not accept anyone, they say. Even liberal European democracies are not, as seen as allies or at least not considered as such. So this is really to say there's two main dynamics since the fall of the regime. HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, consolidation of power, state institution, no democratic inclusivity, while seeking to gain international and regional legitimacy. And maybe to say this, within this perspective, I was talking in introduction of the fragmentation of the country. Syria is very much fragmented, and it's important to say that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the new ruling authorities, do not govern the whole of Syria. South, Sueda, and Dara are outside of governmental authorities, and similarly of the northeast, dominated by the autonomous administration of the northeast. But just to give you an example, because I was back in Syria for the first time in 14 years at the beginning of the year, and I was able to travel a bit throughout the country. A city like Jaramana, I don't know if you heard of it, is within Damascus, considered in Damascus countryside, but 10 minutes away from the city center. The local population did not accept Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So the entry and the exit of the city is controlled by local defense forces that is affiliated with Jews armed forces. But the city is very much cosmopolitan. It was initially, prior to the revolution, more Druze and Christian. Now it was around 200,000 people prior to 2011. Now it is composed of 1 million people. You had a lot of IDPs coming from rural areas of Damascus, fleeing the war imposed by the Syrian regime, and they have developed, their own kind of municipality, some form of own governance. So just like in Sueda, well, in Sueda it was refused because initially the new governor should have been a woman from Sueda. This was refused by the government to impose its own governor. In Jaramana, so its own defense forces, but it has also its own municipality that is led by a woman. And you have local forces, democratic, progressive, quite interesting. I'll come back on this later on. But it's to give you the limitation of this government, because in its attempt to consolidate its power, one of the opportunities that I've been saying to the Syrian Democrats and progressive is that the political space has been expanded. HTS, while consolidating its power, still does not have the whole human and military capacities to govern the whole of Syria. You just have to understand that a few months ago, HTS was basically, governing Idlib, had an administration of 8,000 public servants with an armed forces between 15 to 30,000 armed forces, military. Now with the Syrian National Army, which is basically a Turkish proxy, former Islamic groups, former Syrian, Free Syrian Army groups, it goes up to 70, 80,000, and with the new recruitment, 100,000. But this is still not enough to govern the whole of Syria. Just for you to in comparison, the Syrian army prior its fall had officially 300,000 soldiers. Okay, lack of training, lack of salaries, etc. Moreover, you have territorial and political fragmentation. You have foreign influences. From day one, since after the fall of the Assad regime, Israel has expanded its occupation of Syrian lands, of the Golan and the southern territories, and bombed massively military institutions in Syria, and has been continuously exploiting sectarian division, or trying to exploit them, especially the Druze and the Kurds, to have a weak Syria. And actually, they've been lobbying the United States to maintain a weak Syria. And because now the main actually foreign power in Syria today is Turkey, have been lobbying for the US to say that Russia should maintain the military bases in Syria against the rising Turkish influence, because Turkey is today the main foreign power in Syria and is still occupying lands in the northwest, notably the Kurdish majority inhabited areas of Afrin that suffered massive demographic change. It want also to establish its own military bases within Syria. It's also an important market for Turkish products to be exported, and politically. So economically, militarily, and politically, Turkey is the most important, and it's been backing very much now the new ruling authorities of HTS, while it doesn't want to see any form of autonomy in the northeast by the Kurdish majority inhabited population in these areas. Now, when it comes to the economy, we have a similar kind of process, a process where HTS decides on its own, closed circles, and its class orientation is quite clear also. Since the beginning of its, the new ruling authorities have mostly met, when it comes to economic fields, businessmen from within the country and outside of the country. When it went to the UAE, the foreign minister had a meeting with 70 businessmen, a big businessman, Syrian businessman in the UAE. And basically, it has announced that it will go through a transition from a so-called socialist economy to a competitive free market economy respecting Islamic Sharia. To be clear, Syria was never socialist. At the best time ever in the 60s, 70s, it was a state capitalist economy, meaning that the state was the primary motor of development. But Bashar Assad accelerated the neoliberalization of the economy, privatization, etc. So HTS is only deepening, accelerating economic dynamics that were present prior its fall. Meaning, in an interview with Financial Times, the foreign minister has said that it wants to see Syria privatize its airport, port, main infrastructures, while engaging in main austerity measures, such as cutting subsidies, which is has already done on fuel, oil, bread, which is a key essential product for the majority of the Syrian population. Just for you to know, Syrian population, 90% live under the poverty line. The cost of reconstruction is estimated between 250 to 400 billion. Main infrastructures are destroyed, lack of skilled labor, lack of stability of the Syrian pound, while the Syrian pound is also challenged. In the north, it's the Turkish lira that is used. And you have a process of dollarization within the economy because of the lack of confidence within the Syrian pound today. And other structural economic problems. But HTS, with its policies, neoliberal measures, austerity measures, privatization, is only deepening, the socioeconomic inequalities and the underdevelopment of the same economy. At the same time, it wants to go back to the free trade agreement that was concluded by the prior Syrian regime in 2005 with Turkey, which already at the time had a negative effect on the SMEs in Syria, on the small and medium enterprise in Syria. A lot of them closed in the big cities of Damascus, Aleppo, and the peripheries. So today, imagine the national production that is very much weakened, both industry and agriculture. If you let a free trade for Turkish product, there's no way you can compete. There's a degree of competitivity is very much in favor of Turkey. So this will destroy even much more the productive sectors of the economy, especially manufacturing industry, which are key to any kind of economic recovery for the future. Just to give you some numbers, the total value of export for Syria was in 2011, 12 billion. Now it does not exceed 1 billion. So you show the destruction of the national production. As I was saying, it is also seeking to lay off hundreds of thousands of state employees. No methodology has been explained, just saying they're ghost employees. But there's complete chaos in the way they're being laid off. And this is why there's massive protest throughout the country against this kind of measures. There's attempts to coordinate workers that have been laid off, structures of forms of alternative trade unions throughout the region, but it's still very much at its premises. But they've been trying to resist this kind of measures. But imagine for people that already have difficulty to live, because state salaries do not exceed $25, $30, the minimum state salary. Private sector, you get a bit more, 60, 70. But most of the Syrians, to be able to survive, live on remittances sent by Syrians outside of the country. Just to give you some comparison. So if we say that the minimum state salary is between $25, $30, let's say medium one, high between $50, $100, you're two to live, okay, you maybe get 200, but the average cost of living for a family of 5 in Damascus is nearly $700. So imagine the gap, while you still have inflation, etc. So on both issues, democratic and economic, and no one denies that the challenges that faces Syria, any kind of political actor that would have arrived after 14 years of war, 50 years of dictatorship, destruction, sanctions, etc., would face enormous challenges. The issue is the economic and political orientation, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is deepening the problems we have in Syria. Fragmentation socially, deepening of socio-economic problems, etc. So in conclusion, maybe, or to try to seek, alternative path in my analysis, what would be, maybe the road to see a more democratic, inclusive path, more economic recovery, etc. First of all, it goes through a more inclusive and democratic transitional phase, where you have other political parties participating in it, truly inclusive discussion, a constitutional committee that is not only nominated by the Syrian presidency, because regardless of the time elections could take, 4 or 5 years, the issue is not about the long term, the 3 or 5 years. Is the issue who is deciding, how these decisions are being made. So basically participation in the decision making. But, and obviously everything is a result of balance of forces. The slogan of the new ruling authorities have been, since the 8th of December, who has won, decide. Who has conquered Damascus, decide. So basically HDF decides on its own. But, and to allow a widening democratic participation. This is also lacking among Syrian opponents, actors, the civil society, etc. Two main issues must be put forward, two factors. First of all, security environment. And definitely the last week has shown that it's very difficult to do politics outside of Damascus, especially in coastal areas, Homs. Honestly, and the sectarian massacres did not come from nowhere. Obviously, there's the past 14 years, even sectarian tensions, but for the vast majority of Alawites, they were happy to see the fall of the regime. Yes, they were scared, but they were happy because they felt that Bashar Assad has been instrumentalizing them, used them. They were in public state services, in the army, they have very low salaries, and they saw Bashar Assad just accumulating and his family, capital accumulation, wealth, etc., where they were living in poverty. So there was a period where the new ruling authorities could have said, because there were some remnants of the regime, as we see the last week, using their arms to attack Egypt, that could have been a period, listen, let's collaborate to put an end to really these remnants of the regime, the ones that have arms, etc. What happened? Quite on the opposite. There've been a rise in attacks against Alawite civilians. And I'm not talking about people that were involved in the army or crimes. Talking about, and even in January, when I visited Homs, it was very tense. There were checkpoints and the entry of Alawite majority inhabited neighborhoods. And not only people, HTS, security services, entering homes and just checking their arms or not. No, there were violations of human rights already from them, increasing assassinations, kidnapping of Alawite civilians. There were in 2 cities in rural Homs, attacks and death and killing of 20, 30 civilians. And when actually the attacks from the remnants of the regime occurred the last week, and there were attacks and killing of 200 security services. So it's undeniable they have a responsibility. But what was the response? It was full sectarian hatred and letting, armed groups from Damascus, from the north, not only under the pretext of fighting remnants, fighting against civilians. So there needs to be a security environment, a secure environment to do politics. This has not been the case. And secondly, there has been no process of transitional justice, which could have prevented this kind of revenge killing, sectarian tensions. Why there's not been any kind of transitional justice? Because it's also not in the interest of the new ruling authorities. Because the new army is composed of former armed groups that have blood on their hands, that committed a lot of crimes. For example, the Syrian National Army in the north against the Kurds, but also Arab civilians. Julani, Ahmed al-Sharif, Jabhat al-Nusra committed a lot of crimes. So they have no interest to see a transitional justice that is successful and not only targeting remnants of the Assad regime, but also other armed groups. Finally, if we want a real transitional phase that is inclusive and democratic, you need an improvement of the socio-economic situation. You cannot have participation of the majority of the population if 90% are living under the poverty line, that are struggling to pay their rents. Basically, challenging for their daily life, how to eat, how to send their children to school, transport networks, etc. And the current economic decisions are only worsening this situation. So all these elements are preventing also a successful transitional phase. So in conclusion, I would say that, again, not denying that you have huge challenges that were from day one present, that any kind of political actor would have to. It's saying that the orientation taken by the new ruling authorities is only deepening these problems. And my worry is that instead of talking of hoping for an economic recovery or reconstruction process, a truly democratic phase, we will see more fragmentation, whether socially, politically, that can be instrumentalized by foreign actors and have been, and therefore new forms of violent confrontation, and therefore a new cycle of violence. So Syria is facing, again, huge challenges. it seems as a continuation. And really, the last week was the kind of euphoria that I witnessed in Syria at the beginning of the year that was until present recently has kind of stopped, and we're in a new period, I would say, once more.
Thank you so much for your presentation, albeit bleak.
I'm
We're
sorry.
hoping some, something. I know it's not your fault. Definitely is Sharat's fault, not yours. But to be honest, how much? I mean, how much could you expect from Sharat coming from the background he's coming, right? Like how different can his orientation be? But let's not go down that philosophical path. But I would like to ask if you'd like to talk a little bit about the like not intra ruling power dynamics. I mean, we have Shara, we know the Jabhat Sham is there, they're the ruling power, they are, the face of the authority, but how much do they have, how much in agreement they are with the other powers? How much do the other, groups do things out of, without the orders of Shara, or how much leniency does Shara have to show towards this group in order to consolidate his power? And perhaps isn't this one of it's kind of what's been going around, is that Shara can do much because he doesn't have full control of the ruling powers, right? So he's trying to consolidate his authority, and he goes to the ruling power first and then the state. What is your take on this? Would you like to speak about it for a bit?
Yes, thank you, Zakia. Obviously, I haven't said it in introduction, but Hayat Tahrir al-Sham went through major evolution. I think it's wrong. Some of the press and academic literature still characterize it as a transnational jihadist organization. No, it is now an organization far from being democratic or etc. But it is within a national framework. Its political objective is within Syria, to make it clear. And it's not anymore a transnational jihadist organization. It is very pragmatic and has, shown this pragmatism in the past few years. And I think what we're witnessing today is also a form of pragmatism in the willingness of consolidating its internal power and gaining legitimacy outside of it. Now, what's the relation with other political actors, if you want, on a macro perspective within Syria? First of all, you have the Syrian National Army, which is acting as a Turkish proxy. And most of its commanders are now commanders within the new Syrian army. Abu Hamsha is one of them, etc. And they've been, still very much acting in favor of Turkey. But I mean, Turkey has an interest that these groups serve the agenda of HTS now. While HTS and Turkey were quite, had their differences prior to the fall of the regime, HTS has autonomy. Turkey is still the major actor providing it its support. Turkey has provided presented its willingness to arm and train the new Syrian army, and therefore the SNA is still very much under, I would say, the command of the HTS. Okay, does not mean that you don't have differences, but I mean. And this is where I come from, the responsibility. And so I know the argument saying, there's lacking human and military capacity. So they're not responsible for everything. The problem is they did everything to consolidate on a very exclusive way. So if they cannot have it all, they have a lack. If they say they have a lack of human and military capacities and of assistance, so why do they not open up? You see? If they open up, they can they can consolidate also in a way in a more global power. Similarly, the crimes that were accumulated in the past few months, at one point you can control them. And to tell you, speaking with, and this was already the case in January, I spoke with several local activists, notably in Homs, that are working for civilian peace. You see, between Alawites, Sunnis, between the region. First of all, the violation of human rights were given in a private way directly to HTS, saying, you're saying this is isolated individual acts. Okay, act on it. This was never done. And afterwards, they went publicly. So this shows you they cannot only say we don't have the resources to deal with it. And if it's the case, why not integrate other actors? Now I come to the other actors. The South, for example, Sweda and Der'a. Especially Sweda, which is majority inhabited with Jewish population, said it very clearly since the fall of the Assad. We're ready to join the Syrian army, but as an organized and not through individual, and if we have a truly democratic transitional phase. This is lacking until today. And this is why they refuse to join the new Syrian army. Similarly, in Der'a, there's a lack of, trying to seek, joint program or etc. So, and this is why the lack of integration in new state institutions, etc. When it comes to the Northeast and the Kurdish issue, the latest agreement that was made for two main reasons: pressure of the US on both actors, and secondly, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham needed to show some form of unity, especially to outside, following the sectarian massacres that occurred in the Alawite population. This said, the agreement was challenged by large sections of the population among the Kurdish population, and was even more challenged following the publication of the constitutional declaration, because basically it's a continuation of what we've seen before, discriminatory de facto declaration regarding the fact that only Arabism or Arab language is recognized. And to tell you honestly, even talking with people that are close to the autonomous administration area and my research, the agreement is kind of very much symbolic politically, rather than entering into details. For example, the debate still remains what will happen with the Syrian democratic forces. Okay, no one denies that they need to be integrated in the Syrian army. But how is the question? As an organic force or as an individual? And this is clear. SDF refused to have only individuals. Similarly, on the nature of the state, on one side, they understand the autonomous administration, understand decentralization. Others, no, we still have a central authority. And after the issue of entering autonomous administration within state institutions, you have 200,000 employees in the autonomous administration area. How are you going to integrate them while you're seeking to lay off more than 300, 400,000 state employees? So on the intra-power, this is the key issue. And this is why I say HTS is responsible for the current situation, whether the sectarian massacres and the fragmentation. You cannot have it all. You cannot say on one side, we lack the resources, but you consolidate in an exclusive way your power authority. Or you can consolidate, but it will be a more horizontal form of authority, but seeking less fragmentation, whether socially, territorially, politically, by seeking true agreements with other political actors. And this is what is lacking, basically. I hope it answers your question.
It does, but we have more follow-up questions in regards to the domestic dynamics. Senior consultant of CEMMIS asks more about, is there a military or political power that is challenging HTS at this moment? For example, what is also the relationship with the Islamic State? We have is there a serious challenge to the current regime, basically? And yeah, so, and what is the situation on the ground regarding jihadist groups that are not incorporated, like IS and Horas ad-Din?
Okay, if I understood well, because it's not always clear, Zaki, I'm sorry. It's a bit cutting. I don't know for the others it's the same.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. That was you want to do the question?
just the first case is there any challenges from remnants of the regime, right?
Necessarily, any military or political challenge doesn't have
Okay.
to be from the regime.
Okay.
To the regime, to the new regime. I mean, to the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
And the second was, oh yeah, the Hurras ad-Din Islamic State. Yeah. Yeah. So to be clear, because of the former nature of the Assad regime, which I characterize as a patrimonial regime, where the centers of power were concentrated basically in the presidential palace, mostly Assad families. Mahar Assad was the 4th Brigade head, yani Asma al-Assad and Bashar played the key economic and political role. They will not, and the armed insurrection that we witnessed was, it cannot be a challenge nationally to the new, what I call the new regime in construction of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It can create instability, but it cannot challenge its authority. And plus, what is important to say, that it was an armed insurrection without popular support, quite on the opposite. When it comes to one of the reasons why also they seek a form of agreement with the autonomous administration of the Northeast for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they know they cannot challenge it militarily. Plus, they have the American presence, 2,000 soldiers in the Northeast, and they want good relation with the US. So both militarily or politically, they don't want to challenge the autonomous administration. And militarily, autonomous administration has between 50,000 to 80,000 soldiers. So it's a big and trained army. So it would be very difficult without the support of Turkey. And Sweden do have armed groups, but it wouldn't be a challenge for HTS. But it would be a challenge, HTS coming in these regions. They would be seen, if they challenge militarily and defeated the local armed groups that are mostly Druze, they would be seen as an occupation forces, if you see what I mean. So it's, at the same time, you don't have an internal actor, political actor that wants to challenge the HTS, but at the same time, HTS does not have the strength, military, political, economy, to change other political actors, if I would put it like this. When it comes to Haras ad-Din and more, especially Islamic State, if there's more territorial fragmentation, more instability, could benefit from this to redevelop. But what is interesting to see is that one of the ways also it has been selling itself, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, to the Western actors especially, and this even prior it took power. HTS is saying basically to Western actors, I can be a force with you in the fight against terrorism. And already it's now it's not even more a secret, but as a high number of Islamic State militants and commanders, such as and Haras ad-Din as well, former Al-Qaeda, have been killed by US drones and fighters following information provided by HTS. And you see something similar kind of with the Taliban also in Afghanistan, trying to sell themselves as being a force that can fight against ISIS, that can be a force of so-called stability. So this is one of the ways also for HTS to gain legitimacy. And similarly, again, to show you how it wants to win kind of Western kind of states and discourse, Ahmed al-Shah, same presidencies, was also saying, we can be, preventing the arrival of new ways of migration that was used by Assad against you. So also to please on the issue of migration, this has been repeated. So this is a bit the cartography. After, we cannot deny that Israel, just as in the rest of the region, is acting in a very, creating more instability by its continuous threats and bombing and exploitation of sectarian division that exists and is the result also of HTS policies. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you very much for a very deep presentation of what's going on domestically in Syria right now. You painted an even more troubling picture than is out in the press. So my question is more on the geopolitical side of things. I was curious to hear your opinion on the Gulf, on the current state of the lack of Gulf Syrian relations, because what we saw in previous years during the latter days of the Assad regime was that there was a big push for Assad to be legitimized by Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and so forth. So what I wanted to ask was, what's going on right now? We don't see the Gulf anymore in Syria, at least publicly. But we know that Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have pretty good relations with Turkey, especially during the past 2 years and the financial crisis in Turkey. Is there any way that Turkey is behind the curtain trying to push Saudi or Emirati interests in Syria?
No, indeed, Stavros. It's a very good question. Well, so we have a policy of Saudi Arabia on one side, UAE, and Qatar. Qatar was the one to refuse normalization without preventing its advances, okay? And even its ally, Turkey, its most important ally, was in a phase of normalization now. Shouldn't forget, with the Assad regime. Well, Saudi Arabia, basically, the logic to do the normalization of the Assad regime is the same, the logic of normalization with HTS, especially after HTS president Mohammed al-Julani, said, the revolution is finished. We are not a threat to you. And moreover, he was saluting the great achievement of Mohammed bin Salman. He was saying his economic program, Vision 2030, is amazing, that he wished to do the same thing, etc. So for Saudi Arabia, the key issue, and that's what it understood. If you remember, Mohammed bin Salman came to power, very aggressive policy. Foreign policies against Iran, against Turkey, launching a war in Yemen. All of this was a failure. And within the economic policy of Vision 2030, the main objective is to have regional stability. And this means also seeking good relations or cordial relations with former rivals, Qatar, Turkey, Iran, etc. Because it needs stability to have a successful, economic growth. And today the question is, just as what it was doing with Assad, saying it's better to, try to normalize and cool down things, it's doing the same with HTS. Okay, UAE was a bit more but as it was more opposed, and it made quite strong declarations against the new ruling authorities. But as Saudi Arabia accepted it, it followed kind of it. So it welcomed also the foreign minister. It came, but it's definitely less cordial with the new authorities. Now you have Qatar and Turkey, and Qatar has an interest to see Saudi Arabia more involved in Syria, because basically Syria needs money. Qatar can put a bit of money, and Turkey will benefit by its construction companies, its companies, it has the know-how, but you need where the money is going to come from. It's the Gulf. One of the problems to go further is, however, the sanctions, the Western sanctions and the US. And this is why you haven't seen more, even, for example, the rise in the state salaries should have been funded by Qatar, but has been postponed because they're scared still of US sanctions. Trump is still very much wanting to maintain sanctions and maintain weak Syria. So the problem of sanctions is an issue, such as, the providing of oil, investments, is still being, much of an obstacle is a sanction, even though it's not the only issue. There's two other issues, the economic structural challenges I was talking about, but also, and this is a problem you find also in Lebanon, is that basically the ruling elite in Syria and Lebanon think we still have the political economy of the Gulf 30 years ago. They will throw money like this. This is not anymore the case. They're interested in bringing foreign investment to their own countries and economic growth in their main economies. This does not mean that they won't make investment, but it won't be like before, just throwing money. And there's a change in the political economy of Gulf monarchies. Attract foreign investment, develop and diversify their own economy. And this is what also they're seeking, a more authoritarian, stable region. So this is a bit, to say, but again, one of the main thing that changes is that basically US hegemony in the region is very much based today on Israel. Israel is the key actor, serving US interest. And it's not the opposite. Sometimes there's analysis about the Israeli pro-lobby. This is the wrong way to see it. And today, especially with the Trump administration, it's, very harsh policies, harsh kind of doing politics, and is giving everything, is allowing everything to Israel. And this runs a bit in contradiction, and this is the kind of tension with Gulf monarchies that want to see a form of authoritarian stability in the region for their own sake. And Israel policies currently is creating instability. And this is the tension. This is the tension that you have, because they understand very well, Gulf monarchies, that without the removal of sanctions, Israel not bombarding continuously Syria, threatening it, to reach a form of authoritarian stability is a bit more difficult. And even, they've been, and the new government, even though they have a jihadist background, but as I said, they haven't stopped saying they don't want a war with Israel, and even putting, a bit sending messages, we're ready to make peace. The only problem they will have is most probably the refusal of large section of the Syrian population. So this is what I would say where the Gulf is. So you have a Saudi policy ready to, to deal with it. Qatar that is pushing with its ally Turkey for removal of sanctions, and Saudi Arabia as well. UAE is more in a wait and see, but as they saw Saudi Arabia, the main, if you want, it's the main actor in the Arab states now. Pushing forward to a form of normalization, it will follow to some extent, but it will not be the primary actor pushing for the, normalization, investments, etc. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I have a follow-up question on what you said, because I want to ask about Israel. I want to ask about the strategic upgrading of the Golan Heights. You mentioned that Israel is creating instability, further instability in the region this way. How does the current Syrian government see this? You mentioned that they want to make peace with Israel, perhaps do what Assad couldn't do for the past 20, 30 years. Does the current Syrian government see this as an affront, or does it try to undersell it in order to be able to break bread with Israel or whatever?
So, if you look at the past, it was really actually Israel that prevented the peace with Syria, even at the time of the father, of the son, because the Assad regime would have been happy to make this deal and was preventing, any form of resistance from Syria against the occupied Golan or even, etc. And even in this, until the last moment, Israel was not happy with the fall of the regime. They said they wanted the remaining of the Assad regime, but a weak one. And they were actually seeking a form of deal. So now, there's if you want, several dynamics. What I was saying, the current authorities would like to see, because it would stabilize, the situation in the south. if they saw a form of agreement with Israel. And I'm not sure if it's true, but I've seen today, but I don't know if it's rumors or not. Apparently, someone from the government or even Jolani gave an interview with an Israeli newspaper. I don't know if you saw this information or hasn't been confirmed. But basically, their main threats in their eyes is not Israel, or at least directly for now, but rather Iran, Hezbollah, and this is why also you have further tension at the border with Lebanon, if you noticed, with Hezbollah, etc. So I think they would like to see, in a way, to consolidate also the relation both with the Gulf and the Western actors that would see it very positively. The problem is, as I was telling you, Israel has been given a free hand, complete free hand. So in following the few days after the fall of the Assad regime, Israeli government confirmed the decision to double the numbers of settlers on the occupied Golan from 30,000 to over 50,000. So this is already a message that is quite not positive. Secondly, you have extension of the occupation. Okay. Thirdly, you have attempts to instrumentalize sectarian and ethnic division within Syria by connecting certain Jews, religious officials, dignitaries that are known to be in contact with the main Jews personalities in Israel and letting them come here. I don't know if you saw 3 days ago, 2-3 days ago, around 50, 60 Jews, religious dignitaries went to Israel. And this is also a way to create tensions within Syria, which is something that is refused. Also contacting the Kurds. So making phone calls with Mazlum Abdi in a period of tension. And also, to create problems with Turkey, etc., to kind of provocation. So we have it. Israel knows that it is needed by the US in the region. And this is where I say there's a tension. Because for the US to consolidate its hegemony in the region, it's not enough only harsh, armed, domination, etc. You will need political, and this is why they were pushing so much and have been pushing so much for the normalization between Israel and Arab states. It's the only way to consolidate fully, I believe so, their hegemony in the region, which is a bit, and very far from it, but it's in the process of being challenged by China, even though we're very far from it. Most of the Gulf monarchies still depend militarily and politically on the US. However, China is the biggest purchaser of Saudi oil, and this has been the case for a while, similarly for Iran. So what I see, there's a tension here. There's a tension, and to seek normalization in this condition is going to be very hard, because the major difference, if you want, for normalization, to compare Israel and the UAE, or Israel with Saudi Arabia, what is the main difference? Is the UAE does not have to deal with a local indigenous population that is the majority of the population. Saudi Arabia has to deal with 60% of indigenous population. And it knows that a normalization with Israel is very much, especially after the 7th of October, unpopular. So it could bring a lot of opposition. So here's the tension, basically, in this political scene. And the fact that I believe that Saudi Arabia would enter a normalization process if there was even a plan put on the table. But even putting a plan on the table today is nearly impossible. You see the Gaza destroyed. Settlements in the West Bank is now between numbers of settlers is between 700,000 to 800,000. The dispossession of lands have increased in Palestine occupied territories. And even the Israeli Knesset, so parliament, has refused the two-state solution. So even to suggest, I believe that it's not possible anymore, and it's been for a while, but even to put this plan is impossible. And therefore, regarding Syria, Israel is indeed in a because it knows it has a free hand, in a position to say, we will create and ask for more. And this means the Golan, you will have to abandon it. And maybe also some sectors of the south. Just as if you've seen the ceasefire with Lebanon is not respected because they have a free hand. They're putting military establishment in the south of Syria as well. They're allowed to do this. So why would this stop? So it creates even more instability. I hope it answers your question. Again, it's not really a very positive, but I'm sorry, otherwise we have to take another region, even though it's more and more difficult to find positive things in another region of the world.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Agreed. Thank you. I promise this is the last question. Just a final comment on Russia and its bases within this geopolitical dynamic. Where do you place it? And then, we will say goodbye. You so much of your time. Thank you.
Well, no, my pleasure, and I hope it's helpful for the discussion. So Russia has been definitely, with Iran, the most important actor supporting the Assad regime. You have historical relations between, the Russian state, even at the time of the Soviet Union, with Syria. The military base of, especially the port, the naval port of Russia is very important, not only because of its access to the Mediterranean Sea, but for its operations in Africa as well. So the fall of the Assad regime was a loss, we cannot deny it, but Russia is very pragmatic, especially in a period where, and one of the reasons why, the Assad regime fell as a castle of cards, as we say, is first of all, it didn't have any more internal support, really none at the end. And its two main actors supporting it, Russia on one hand and Iran, Hezbollah on the other hand, were very much, for their own reasons, diminished and reduced politically, militarily. Russia by its war on Ukraine, and Israel war against Hezbollah and Iran in the region. Now, the way the regime fell, these are the structural reasons I explained, most probably, and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, during the attack on Damascus, was already making call to Russia to be pragmatic, and they could find a solution. And I believe that HTS has already, and they've been, now I think it was yesterday, Russia will provide some oil and gas to Syria that is lacking, especially that Iran is no more providing fuel oil to Syria following the fall of the regime. Putin is very pragmatic and can deal with this new government, just as it has dealt with the Taliban in Afghanistan. As soon as they guarantee the interests. So there's been a bit of pressure of some European states to ask to the Syrian state, remove your Russian military base. But Amir Hayat Tahrir al-Sham will not do this except if they receive something big in return. And this has still not occurred. Because even though the European Union has lifted or suspended temporarily the sanction, first of all, this is not enough. But even if they suspend completely tomorrow, the key issue is US sanctions because of the weight of the US financial market, the secondary nature of the sanctions, etc. So for the moment, and they've been quite cordial messages sent between Damascus and Moscow for now, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, I think, will let open its relation with Russia, especially if they have nothing against it. And especially now that the US have good relation, or at least seeking good relation with Putin. Why would it do it? The problem is with Europe, but Europe is considered, and unfortunately, acting as a, junior of the US, basically. And with the rapprochement between the US and Russia, it doesn't push Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to pressure Russia, while Putin is very pragmatic and will never, at least European Union rhetorically, after in practice something different. But as for respect of democracy, human rights, Russia will never ask this. It is very much in a transactional relationship with foreign actors. So for the moment, Russia is maintaining its military base. It has lost some economic agreements, but because also the economic agreements that were made were expecting on the Russian private sector to invest. For example, in the Latakia port, you had the public-private partnership deal, or in the phosphate deal. This could be lost, but for Russia, the key issue is not these economic agreements. It's really keeping its military bases, access to the Mediterranean Sea, which is also a way to, for its foreign policies in Africa and other regions. So for the moment, I believe that the military bases will stay for the moment.
Thank you very much. This has been, at the very least, to say, fruitful, enlightening. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to see you in Athens at some point.
With great pleasure.
And to host you in our center live. Thank you so much again, and keep up the great work and publishing. We are very closely follow you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.